Welcome to the San Jose Hockey Now podcast. I'm Sheng Peng, editor-in-chief of San Jose Hockey Now. You can also find my work at MEC Sharks and on Twitter at Sheng_Peng.
And I'm Keegan McNally. You can find me on Twitter at halfball_hockey, at my website, half-ballhockey.com, or at San Jose Hockey Now. It is officially the end of Will Smith's watch. I guess the end of Will Smith watch. Sheng, I'm so excited for this week. It's another good week in off-season shark fandom, I think is the way to put it.
We have a very special guest. Smith #2 jersey?
I am behind. I need to get an Eklund Cali Finn jersey. That's like on my list to buy. And then, I think eventually just a main Will Smith, if he gets #2, which
it looks like he's going to get it. They're already selling it. The Sharks
are already
selling it. So,
well, then I would imagine they're going to hand it to him, hopefully.
Yeah.
I think they had said that he wanted to wear it, and then you're right. I think last night or something they said that he was going to wear it, something like that.
They started selling it. So.
Yeah, exactly. This week we have a very special guest that's going to be on later in the show. Something that is going to interest all of you. Who do we got this week, Shane?
Very exciting guest. We have Sean Coffey. He's a player agent for Cortex Hockey. That's XX Cortex, and he is Will Smith's agent. He's going to bring us behind the scenes of Will Smith's decision to sign with the Sharks.
Yeah, it's going to be a great interview for everybody. It's something that we don't do a lot of on the show, is get like the agent perspective and a lot of this contract negotiation stuff. So excited to bring that content to you guys. Okay. I would say it came a little bit more sudden than I thought it was, but it sounds like, Sheng, you had already had a little bit of a wind on it, as you had put a story out on Sunday, right? That Will Smith was going to be signing. So what went into that?
Yeah, basically on Friday, I started hearing from a very good source that it was happening, and maybe as soon as next week. And I started to work on it, tug on it a little bit. I do want to say that it sounds major coincidence that we have Sean Coffey on. Sean was not my source. If Sean had been my source, I would have been able to confirm it. So I promise you, he was not my source on this story in the end. I did reach out to him, and so we're going to talk about that in the interview. But anyway, I started hearing on Friday, and I basically just pulled around on it, basically how that goes about, and we'll talk about it more in the interview with Sean. But I reach out to multiple sources that I trust that are with the Sharks or Sharks adjacent or whatever, and kind of wait to hear back from them and see what they say. And I got enough from enough other sources besides my initial source, who I really, really trust, that I felt good enough about coming out with the story a couple of days later. Granted, the story was a little bit vague because I had a sense that, like I said, initially I was told it could happen as soon as next week, but I couldn't get a 100% confirmation. I couldn't get the timing, but it's one of those things where I was like, this is going to happen. This is like 95% or whatever. And so it was good enough to come out with. It also jives with everything thought that Will would come out. And just over the off season, I've heard kind of more and more kind of. But anyway, we'll talk more about it. But anyway, that's sort of the genesis of my story.
Yeah, I was very excited. Pretty solid. So yeah. I was curious on that right after you posted it, basically. But I guess initial reactions, I am super excited. I've never been so happy to be wrong before, because I was thinking he was going to go back to college. I've never been so happy to be wrong. I think it's, like we mentioned last week or the week before on the podcast, just having Celebrini and Smith together coming out at the same time, I don't know, just like puts a little buzz into the franchise that like gets me excited to watch for next year. And I don't think that's the overall goal of Mike Grier right now, is to make sure people watch it next year. It's to like get this team better, but it doesn't hurt for sure, to get people to actually come and see games and everything. So that's my initial thoughts. Is I'm excited.
I think that the fan base hasn't really had a lot to really be excited about I think the last time the fan base was really pumped up was when William Eklund made his debut a couple years ago, and the Sharks got out to a quick start that year.
Sure.
and there was a lot of it was a little bit of a kind of fool's gold mirage or whatever, right? But that's the last time that I think I saw the fan base really excited. Even the last couple of years, Eric Carlson scoring 100 points. I'm not sure the fan base was that excited.
Hmm.
They were, but it's kind of like, well, he's putting up 100 points, but for a 60-point team, so big
Yeah.
whoop. And Timo Meyer was, of course, amazing the last couple of years with the Sharks, but all that was to lead up to a trade, right? And trading Thomas Turtle, obviously, I think really cut at the heart for a lot of Sharks fans there,
Yep.
right? So it's nice. It's nice to have that excitement. But on the other part of it too, that I was talking with somebody about this yesterday about suddenly and we talked about this a little bit when we talked with Greg Wyshynski, and
Hmm.
you talked about before, like how all of a sudden the Sharks rebuild makes sense just because of some lottery balls. You use the Chicago Blackhawks example that
Yep.
yeah, their rebuild is going great because they have Connor Bedard.
That's it. That's the only reason
and
why.
and there is some degree of that with the Sharks, that obviously with just a little bit of luck with the lottery balls, that things make sense now. Suddenly people kind of fall into place. In Celebrini, you have a guy who is projected to be your franchise player. Like
Sure.
that's the consensus, that not that he is right now, he's just 17, but that he has everything that makes you think that makes prognosticators,
Hmm.
amateur scouts, scouting directors think that he is going to be a franchise player for a winning team, a
Yep.
number one player for a winning team. Will Smith slots in probably more properly as projected, at least as your number two player
Yep.
on a really good team, not necessarily your kind of the face of the team necessarily, right?
Sure.
And so he kind of slots in so properly at a two. And then you have other guys like William Eklund, like Quentin Musty, like Shakir Mukumadulin, all very good prospects, but none of these guys are guys that necessarily project to be your number one star of the best player on a winning team. And now, though, before a couple years ago, like when William Eklund made his debut, there's because the Sharks had nobody else, right? And so there's so much weight placed on William's shoulders unfairly, and that's what happens naturally because you have no one else to kind of cheer for. I mean, of course, we remember the days when Thomas Borla was the Sharks' number two prospect because the Sharks had nobody else. Remember the days when Noel Gregor was basically the Sharks' best prospect because he had or Dylan Gambrell because the Sharks had nobody else, honestly, right?
The Gambler.
And
the Gambler. That's just
the Gambler, right?
I don't know if it's his actual nickname, but I remember calling
it probably is, yeah. But it's natural for that to happen, of course.
Sure.
So, but it's nice to see that this is not just like because there's nobody else. Like Macklin Celebrini on, I think basically every team in the league would be the number one prospect. Right.
After he's
right. And I mean, of guys who haven't played, he's definitely a better prospect than Matvei Michkov, a very good prospect by himself, obviously. Just the guy that comes off the top of my head, right? And so anyway,
other guys have already played, like Carlson.
Yeah, other guys have played.
Cooley.
And even guys who have played, if you count guys who have played their rookie year, Celebrini is behind Bedard and maybe nobody else. I can't really think of it.
Yeah, that's about it, I think. Yeah, right now it would just be Bedard. And I mean, that's kind of what we've been trying to nail down is where he would go in last year's draft. And it sounds like 2 would be the consensus. Is for the past year, he's been playing like second line, right? He played behind a bigger, tougher, more experienced line in college.
Sure,
and
Cutter,
Cutter's line. And same thing in the World Juniors. He played down the lineup. I think they were even like third line in the World Juniors. But like Smith kind of thrived in that role, getting power play one time with a decreased even strength load, and he put up the most points in the NCAA last year doing that kind of thing. And so I wouldn't be discouraged if everybody's like, well, he's going to slot in behind Celebrini. And it's like, I think honestly that's kind of where he would thrive the most, is if he's your second punch and a 1-2 down in the future. It's he can command a line in a way that gives you a lot of offense on your second line. Center, every situation kind of guy, which I don't think he is. He's different, but very good. So I don't know, just my thoughts on where he's going to slot.
I don't
Eventually.
I don't want to put a ceiling on Will. So of course he can end up being your he might be better than Celebrini in the end.
Who knows?
We really don't know at this point, right?
Yeah.
But in terms of just sort of projections, right? Like, yeah, the Sharks have obviously had a history recently because they've had a dearth of prospects of sort of overextending, giving guys like your top prospects at the time, Gambrell, third line center time when he wasn't ready for it, putting Noah Gregor into your top 9 because even though he wasn't ready for it, this isn't his fault. None of these players' fault. Mario Ferraro as your number 1 defenseman, even though he's not a number 1 defenseman, right? The Sharks have had a history of that recently because they just haven't had the prospects to kind of slot perfectly. William Eklund as the face of the franchise, right? Maybe it's unfair to him too. But now you're starting to see with the players that they've drafted and having these high picks that, again, it's starting to make sense. And I think that's really exciting. Exciting for me to cover because the team that I'm going to watch should start to make a lot more sense.
Sure. Yeah.
But really for the fans though, because obviously you guys have been through it, and I think that I think, well, it's not saying anything. I mean, it's well deserved. We'll just leave it at that. And
sure.
Yeah, like the pieces though are starting to make sense though. Yeah, we'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, they're not just slotting in because they have to slot in there. They're
exactly.
slotting in where they theoretically should end up in their
They should
careers.
end up. Yeah, exactly. It's not giving again X center prospect a top 6 role just because you have nobody else. So yeah,
I really summer. That's the most exciting part of the offseason. Rosterbations. Rosterbation, just a constant shuffling around of people every time we sign somebody and go, oh, they're going to feel great on the third line right wing. They're going to be excellent top 4D. It all falls apart by the time training camp happens and people get sent down, waived, and all sorts of things. But
it might be a little early for the rosterbation because you guys are, of course, just rookies. But we're talking a couple of years from now for Celebrini to hit. You hope to hit his prime and Smith too.
Yeah. Really excited about Smith. I think this is interesting. There wasn't any kind of because the Sharks are so bad, I'm gonna go back another year.
Sure.
He's just no, I think it's time for the next step, and I'm excited to go to the Sharks, and that makes me happy because sometimes the Sharks could, especially the past year, have been kind of shit on. So, and that's the technical term is shit on.
and that's a part too. That's why I kept in touch with this story over the last year, and I did a story. I talked to Sean, I think 3 months ago, and I just asked them where things were at with the Sharks, and so that part I felt pretty good about. I heard nothing worrisome in terms of the Sharks' relationship with Will. I do understand that after the Cutter Gauthier situation, that everyone's really worried and everybody's sort of on high alert for any of these kind of situations to pop up. But yeah, I think in most cases though, these relationships, it's one of those things where I don't think that we're at a point where teams are going to be worried about drafting NCAA prospects. It's what happened with Cutter Gauthier is not a normal thing. So
yeah, it's it's definitely not the norm. It just kind of shocked it around the same time and the same team that Smith went for. So there's a lot of baseless speculation. There you go. All right. So an interesting aspect of this whole thing is during this whole Cutter doing some interviews and things like that, it was mentioned that I don't know if somebody asked it to him or not, but that he could play in the AHL instead of the NHL, and he would be fine with playing either in the AHL or NHL per his words. And I guess we just want to clear up that yes, he can play in the AHL because he's not a CHL prospect. He's an NCAA prospect that now can't go back to the NCAA. And the Sharks basically can put him wherever they want to. NHL, AHL, ECHL. Very, very unlikely ever. But, that's just something to bring up. But, yeah, I wanted to get your thoughts on that. Do you, or what do you think about this AHL? Do you think that he sees any time in the AHL, or is this more of a possibility, like rather than a probability, I guess is a good way to
I
put it.
think more possibility than probability.
Mm-hmm.
I think that while I do trust what he says in terms of that he trusts the development staff, and so if they deem that he needs to go down there a little bit, and there are things in his game to iron out for sure. Um, but how
Yeah.
do I say? Actually, yeah, there's something that we need to ask Sean, and I don't even know if Sean can say this, but like it would just take an incredible set of circumstances, I think, for him. But this is just my guess that for him to go down to the AHL and go down there long enough that his contract doesn't burn off.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the 9 game, the 10 game cutoff. I don't think that I don't I that Will's kind of ability level right now is more AHL compared to the rest of the Sharks roster, then maybe he just would have gone back. And that's what happens a lot, right? You just sort of figure out, hey, I think I'm not quite ready for the NHL.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily want to play in the AHL, so I'm just gonna go back to school, right?
For
I think
sure.
that's a lot of kids have that sort of,
And a lot of kids that don't have the added pressure for him to go back.
right. So I think that there is a genuine projection from, I would guess, from everybody that he should be good enough
Mm-hmm.
for the NHL. Obviously, he's not going to be great at the NHL in his first year as a rookie and for a not very good team.
Mm-hmm.
And as a player that is more offensively oriented, that still needs to learn a bit about the defensive side of things. And so I'm not expecting him to take over the NHL by any stretch, but I think that he should be good enough to stay. One comparison that we've seen a lot online is, of course, William Eklund. And William Eklund was the first year, 21-22, was with the Sharks. And then they, for 9 games or 8 games, 9 games, I think, and they sent him back to Sweden. The following year, he came over, but he played mostly in the AHL. And then he played 8 games with the Sharks, and they sent back down again, mm-hmm. so they could slide his entry level contract. And finally, last year, or this past season, where he finally played a full AHL season. But I think a couple things are different between Smith and Eklund. Number one, I don't want to get too deep into that because that's an argument for 2 years ago. But basically, the Sharks are off to a quick start that season, and I believe William, with all his limitations, was a top 9 forward for that team at that point. It was obviously a very shallow depth team, but if you're trying to win, which they said they were trying to do in 21-22, which they were still in that kind of mindset of, we're not rebuilding. This is Bob Boughner's last year. They still had Brent Burns. They still had Erik Karlsson, Timo Meier, anyway, all a lot of those big names, right? And so, but though the one thing though that we recognize, that we all agree on, was that Williams' body, he was definitely very thin. Yeah, very, very light, and he was willing, but he was surviving in the NHL. I think he was doing an okay job of it, but he was just surviving in NHL at that point. And so his body wasn't quite, his brain was, but his body wasn't quite ready for NHL. I think you can tell, you can just look at the two guys, right? Will Smith is more solidly built at this point. He looks a bit more like he can handle sort of the rough stuff of the NHL, the grind of the NHL physically at first glance than Eklund could have.
Definitely better than a 19-year-old Eklund.
Yeah, definitely, right? And then the second part of it is the leverage part of it, where William Eklund has no leverage coming from Sweden, and the Sharks can just send him to kind of keep pushing that contract right back, right? In this case, though, with Will Smith, again, I don't know if there's anything been agreed on, but I think it's a tough sell to Will Smith if he thinks that he's not going to get to that 10 games to burn off his contract. And the Sharks basically say, yeah, like we're going to push that contract back. Well, then why come out, right? Yeah. And so even if it's not on paper, even if it's not whatever, I would be shocked. Maybe Will Smith does spend some time in the AHL, but that contract's going to burn though. I think though, that's probably one of those things like, okay, well, I may not play. I may not play full season in NHL, but we're going to play enough that a contract burns, because otherwise, again, why why come out when you have that leverage that Will Smith has that William Eklund does not have? But I think that Will's going to be good enough to stay up though. And also in terms of, I guess the final thing with the Eklund Smith comparison is that with the expectation that Celebrini plays this year in NHL, which everyone expects. I think I've talked to a lot of people. I know that there's been some stories like he might go back, but everyone that I talked to expects Macklin Celebrini to sign with the Sharks and make his NHL debut this coming season too. And Macklin is seen as a more, actually, even though Macklin's younger, he's seen as a more physically mature prospect than even Will Smith.
Yep.
And so Macklin's going to be here the whole year. And I don't basically the timing makes sense. There was no timing argument for William Eklund necessarily that you needed to start his contract going for whatever reason, right? There wasn't a timing argument. So that's an additional thing that Macklin's going to be up here. So it kind of makes sense. Okay. So I start everybody's clock at the same time. So.
And what I like about that whole clock timing thing is that in 2026, 2027, when both Macklin and Smith are on their third year of their ELC, yes, you have to pay William Eklund more money, but it's probably not going to be an exorbitant amount of money. And
hopefully it is. Hopefully he's that.
Maybe
good,
it is. So
we'll see,
maybe
right?
he's a 90-point player next year, and it's awesome. But anyway, Marc-Edouard Vlasic's contract's finally off the books. Brent Burns is obviously off. You're in the last year of your Erik Karlsson retention. Your Martin Jones buyout is in the last year. Like a lot of it kind of forms into having a lot of cap space in that specific window.
Couture's contract will be done too, right?
Couture's contract, and I think he's still got another.
Or is he a little bit longer? I forget. So many.
He would be in the last year of his contract, so you could
he were getting there, yeah.
You could if he's injured, you could always LTIR'd or a buyout if he's not, that kind of thing. So there's enough time and enough open space that it's also a reason why I think not retaining on Karlsson for half the money makes a lot of sense.
It could, yeah.
If everything kind of starts to get together and I think we did an analysis
and you
of
fit
this.
On Leon Draisaitl
and you add 12 million,
14 million.
we did an analysis of this, like how long it took to get back into like cup contention for getting these like very high picked guys like Taves and Crosby and who else, and it wasn't that long. And I know it still feels like the Sharks are at the bottom bit of the rebuild, and they are, but it feels. I think there's an upward trajectory here that is going to surprise a couple of people in the next 3 years.
Yeah, I mean,
we'll see.
It's not us just overhyping. Obviously, the Celebrini Taves comparisons have been all over the place, and naturally, maybe Smith is akin to a Kane. Not putting that on Will Smith because Patrick Kane won an MVP, so that's a pretty incredible comp. But Craig Button last week, he basically gave us the comp of Crosby and Malkin. Which
I think is a little bit too high on the bar.
Which is very, very rich compared to even like conservative, trying to kind of lower the hype, not overhype it, and say Taves and Kane, which is still pretty incredible. That's very, very that's still a lot of hype, obviously. But
and it's like, yes, Kane is a winger and Taves is the center, but they did that, right? Like I think their last year of their ELC or their first, when was it? Their last year of the ELC for Taves was 2009, 2010. And he played 22 playoff games that year. And, I put up 29 points in his last year of his ELC. So a 29, point per game center and 29 points in 22 playoff game is making $900,000.
Well, that was their first Stanley Cup. Yeah. 2010, right? So.
Exactly. So like, there are opportunities if you have enough cap space to really put together a team with your superstars on ELCs, and it's been done before, and sometimes it works. I don't know if Patrick Kane was signed. I'll look it up right now. If he was around the same ELC,
I think their window was the same because I remember they signed like 10-year like the 8-year contract the same year, like that 10 million per contract. So I think
he was on the last. Yeah, he was in the last year of his ELC. Yeah. He put up 28 points in 22 playoff games and 88 points in the regular season. So yeah, there's an opportunity there. Obviously, Chicago had a whole lot more defensive depth.
Well, you got to find your Duncan Keith. That's
yeah, and
the main
Seabrook
thing.
and
and
your
Jarmison.
Hosa, I think, and who else was on that team? A whole bunch of amazing, amazing players. But you never know. I'm just saying that I really enjoyed the fact that there's both these young guys coming in and a lot of cap space. I think
You're
it's
just
a good
saying you're really
opportunity.
excited.
I'm very excited, man. I'm just gonna keep repeating it. All right, let's move on a little bit. So, theoretical possibility he could go to the AHL. Maybe he spends a little bit of time there, conditioning stints, what have you, or get sent down for rookie things. I'll say that, but I think you're right. I think he spends the majority of the year in the NHL as well. So
I would say
thing that people have been asking about is, does Will Smith play center or does he play wing? And you had done a little bit of research on just some rookie center combos that came out in the same year, because it doesn't seem to be very common, or maybe it is, but who did you find?
Yeah, I wrote a story that we talked about last week, protect to make the lineup more competitive for Will Smith and Macklin Celebrini to development, because like I said, I always maintained throughout the offseason that I was jumping the gun a little bit, because when I said that, I hadn't really done any research on it, and I still have more research to go on this, but I did do kind of a cursory search of rookie centers in the cap era and rookie center combos, and a few just.com, couple hundred centers came back, 222 rookie centers, and just on one page these combos popped up, so it might be more common than I thought. Just a few of them that popped up: Jeff Carter and Mike Richards in 2005-06, Evgeny Malkin and Jordan Staal in 2006-07, and Sean Couturier and Braden Shen in 2011-12. And of course, that's a lot of P's there, right? All alphabetical. And of course, I was looking at the Sharks. I was actually curious if the Sharks had any rookie combos like this. I didn't think it was likely, just because the Sharks have been mostly competitive in the salary cap era, mostly a veteran group. And there wasn't that kind of center rookie combination.
Sure.
Though it does happen, though. And of course, you notice all these names are all guys who ended up being very, very good players in the NHL, like Celebrini and Smith are projected to be. These are all guys who ended up as first line, second line at worst players, right? Jeff Carter, Mike Richards, Evgeny Malkin, Jordan Staal, Sean Couturier, Braden Shen. And I had suggested in my story last week that the Sharks are Logan Couture. And that's still probably a good idea to get somebody like that. But it could be, though, that if you like Smith at center in camp, and it's fine. Or he can move Granlund to wing. Or it just gives you a lot of combinations, right? Especially if Logan is healthy too. And so on that part of it, he said himself that he's open to both. Of course, he has to say that, right? He's not going to start off his first interview as a Shark saying, "I'm not playing the AHL and I'm only playing center." So
yeah,
he's not going to say
I'll
that.
Do whatever I do whatever I want, not what you want.
Yeah. I do think he has played a lot of wing, though. We've seen, right, in different constructions at BC, or other players will take the face off, right? We've seen Gabe Pearl take a lot of face offs for him. So I think that he's not as maybe tied into center as like a Macklin Celebrini is. There might be a little more sort of there's maybe less of an expectation for him to play center than there might be for a Celebrini. So we'll see what the rookie centermen playing key roles in the first season, because everyone I mentioned are all pretty special players, and so are Celebrini and Smith.
Pretty cool. I think like you give each one of them their own line and you kind of some two-way abilities, then it'd be cool. I don't know if it's going to last the entire season or just like spurts, but gives them their own opportunity to grow up the lineup, right? I think they kind of see this Granlund, Zetterlund, Eklund line as their like default number one line right now, because unless Couture returns and Hurdle's gone, so it seems to be the default. Plug these guys in, they'll do okay together, but you never know, that could change too. Granlund is in the last year of his contract, and
that's one thing. Like, even if Logan is held, I don't want to see like the Logan Couture that we expect, the top six player. And so if he is, that's a bonus, but I don't think you can plan for that, especially by July 1st.
Yep.
And so I still think that would be advisable to add a center that who can also play wing, who has no issue going back and forth.
Yeah.
But but I wouldn't necessarily pencil in, even though I did in my story, pencil in Smith at wings. I very well see him at center to start the season.
Be interesting to see, and they do not full on like sign a bunch of crappy contracts, but you got to get some better wingers, I think, for these guys.
Yeah, no, I agree. That was the premise of my story. The whole premise was that both those guys would come out. If for some reason both guys did not come out, fine, tank again for James Hagan. Apologize. Send some chocolates to William Eklund at the start of the season. Hey, we're sorry. We got to do this again.
It's gonna happen again, buddy. Yeah. Just like I don't know. Give Mario Ferraro like a box of chocolates for every single minus he has at the end of the year.
Actually, yes. I really got to really had to feel for Mario there last 5 years, so for sure. And so. But in this case, where they're both out, and again, a lot of people say, "Oh, why didn't you keep them back?" It can't. They're NCAA guys, so they have a lot of leverage in the situation. If you force them to stay back in, and we still don't know exactly what happened with Cutter Gauthier, but it seems like that might have something to do with it. That he thought he was ready to come out, and the Flyers did not, and that was that was a big part of why he's like, "I don't want to come there." And so that's what it sounds like. If Celebrini thinks he's ready to come out, and every indication that I've heard, Celebrini is a guy that wants that next challenge. He's always hungry for that challenge, right? So if you keep him down, if you force him playing with fire there in terms of just this is a situation where, like if they want to come out and you think they're ready, this is not one of those things where they think they're ready and you don't. Most people I've talked to think that Smith and Celebrini are ready for the NHL. They'll take their lumps, obviously. Let's not get that wrong. But so you can't keep them down there. So they're here. So deal with it, right? And so you got to build a better team around them.
Yep.
That's just the fact that matter. No one's saying the Sharks could trade first round picks for Mitch Marner, for Necas, any of those guys, right? But you've got to build realistically a better team around them.
Yeah, they have a few opportunities, especially on the defense, to gain, I think, in the next 2 drafts. But the free agent market is going to be interesting over the next 2 years, and that final ELC year for them both. I'm just going to keep mentioning it because I'm excited about it. But all right, let's do this. Before our Sean Coffey interview, let's do like a points prediction as of now. Can we reserve the right to change it, I guess, if like, I don't know, we for some reason know that Will Smith is going to start in the AHL, I guess.
Of course. This is our too early prediction.
Yeah, all right.
And so, this is our early bold prediction. I also want to add a note too. I actually should have mentioned this earlier. Very hockey smart that I trust. And this is what he tells me about Will Smith, and I think that you guys should take this to heart, like in terms of not to be the Debbie Downer, but just the cautious optimism. Just have a little bit of caution with it. That Will is a more regular, super skilled guy, right? In the sense of that he's still got to learn the defensive end of things. That's part of what makes Macklin Celebrini so special. That Macklin Celebrini is already accomplished defensive player, or he's a guy that has a defensive conscience kind of already as a 17-year-old, which is very, very rare for a player of that skill level as a 17-year-old to have that, right? And that's why there's always comparisons to Jonathan Toews with Celebrini. But with Smith, though, Smith doesn't. He's like most 19 most teenagers who are that much more gifted offensively than everybody else. That's what they lean on. And of course, that's one of the reasons why I think I mentioned this last week or the week before, why I thought Will should come out, because he does need that challenge of the next level, I think, as opposed to the NCAA. And he seemed to agree. He talked about that when in his interview with us yesterday, interview with local media. And so part of that challenge is that he is going to struggle in some ways early on defensively and even offensively too. He's got a lot to learn.
Of course.
And also too, this person watched the Worlds carefully. league source, we'll call him, and he says that the Worlds did not go well for Will in terms of just obviously he didn't play a lot, but he has that's another area where he has a lot to learn. You know, that was his first taste of Angel like competition, and so there's a lot to learn there. Now it's not all gloom and doom though. I think that and in my conversation with this source that I think being next to Macklin's going to help him a lot because Macklin's sort of defensive sort of attentiveness, defensive alertness is going to rub off on Will Smith. It's going to rub off on a lot of the younger Sharks, I think. And I think too that next challenge and not kind of doing that easy thing of going back to college and playing with his buddy. But I think overall, though, the point I want to make is that there's still kind of how do you say it like Will Smith is going to be a typical super skill, and so I think that's kind of a note of caution that someone shared with me. So I think that was interesting, especially about the Worlds, because we know that he didn't play a lot, and so okay, what was behind that? And okay, so according to this guy, he struggled a little bit, and that's going to happen. Bigger ice and obviously heightened competition, and so
yeah, we got to put a number. 82 game season.
Yes, sorry about that. Yeah,
whole year. What do you think, or do you want me to go first?
Yeah, you go first. After I put everybody down again and made everybody.
I'm going with 44. That's my points prediction.
Wow, very exact. Okay.
44. So 44 is the number that Logan Cooley put up last year in his 19-year-old draft plus 2 season coming out of college. Not that they're similar players in how they drive offense, but I think they have similar profiles at least. Cooley's more of a puck possession guy. He does have some amazing playmaking skills, whereas Smith relies a lot heavier on his playmaking and his passing, and both have some defensive deficiencies. But I think based on the roster construction as it is currently, there's not a lot of guys that are very adept at the power play. And I think Will's going to do very well on that and gather points in that way. If they keep him up and they give him enough time and stuff, because he can slot into a lot of power plays on bad NHL teams and do well. I think. Yeah. I think the even strength bit of it's going to be a struggle.
Yep.
But I think that all equals out to 44 is my prediction if he stays the whole year and all that.
Okay. Yeah, so I'm gonna go back to what I just said, and you alluded to that. I think even strength and the defensive side of it, two-way play is going to be a struggle for him this coming year. That'll be my guess. And so I'm going to be a little more conservative on it. And also the Sharks will not be a good team, obviously. So I'm going to say 35 will be my projection. But like I said, I don't necessarily expect him to see AHL time, though. I just think that it's going to be a little up and down. There might be some games where he doesn't play a lot. Yep. He might see a healthy scratch here and there, too. I don't think that would be wild if that were to happen. And I think it's all part of the learning curve in the NHL for him. So it's fine. So it's perfectly fine. Of course, yeah, we'll see. 35, I think, is probably on the more cautious side. So he might blow past both of ours. Yeah.
He could, but there's also Jack Hughes' first year, and his was right after the draft. But he had like 24 points or something in his first year.
Right.
And a lot of times these kind of players do struggle to find offense, especially depending on how good the team is, and they can't get high up in the lineup on even strength. But I don't know. I think the Sharks are bad enough that I think he'll find some time on the power play.
That definitely evens things a lot out. But yeah. It was all like those center players that we mentioned. A lot of them didn't play that much in that first year. I think I looked at I think Jeff Carter averaged like 12 minutes a night, and Mike Richards might have been like at 15, right? And we can guess that with Macklin's two-way game, that Macklin's probably would be closer to that 15-minute mark, and Smith might be on the lower end of it. So we'll see on that. But yeah.
So I am excited. It's a good word to put it. It's been another good week. There's another one happening in about a month when we draft Macklin Celebrini. That'll be another good week. But we'll look out for more news. We didn't mention anything about the coaching search this week. I think we haven't had much. Been a little bit of news, but not too much. So we'll have more to report on that. Hopefully on our next week's podcast, I think. All right. So I hope you all enjoyed the interview with Sean Coffey, and let us know what you think about it. Hope you guys have a good week. Bye.
We have a very, very exciting guest here today. Sean Coffey, player agent for Quartex Hockey. Again, that's double X Hockey. And he is the player agent for Will Smith and Lane Hutson. He's going to take us behind the scenes of Will Smith's decision to sign. And just how did you become an agent?
So I became an agent. I was not involved in hockey when I worked in the sports marketing world. Kent Hughes, the now general manager in Montreal, was very active in the Boston area when I was a player coming up, and I reconnected with him and started doing some player marketing work back in 2015, 2016 for some of his NHL clients, and then found myself back in the rinks. And it was probably 7 years ago or so that we found ourselves in the living room of
sport of your playing days. You saw that you played with the Sioux City Musketeers. Also, too, actually, you played at St. Sebastian High School, famously Mike Greer and Will Smith High School.
Yeah, no, I think that's neat that the three of us both went to St. Sebastian's, a really special place. I probably left St. Sebastian's too early, and I think, like a lot of the best play a straighter line in terms of their path from level to level. I think the majority of good players maybe have to be a bit more precise with when you move on to that next level. And I don't think I'm the only former player that junior hockey chewed up and spit out. And you get to a point where you finally get to, I decommitted from Brown. I ended up having to walk on to St. Lawrence, and you get to a point where you just run out of gas. And I think it offers me a unique perspective now in my role, because in looking back, I find that some of the things I lacked were the most important to an athlete's success. And I think that's, really having joy in what you're doing and being grateful for being able to do it. And I think, you can only fight your way literally and figuratively to that next level. And I think that's true at any level or any sport. It has to start with passion and true love for what you're doing.
Does being an agent sort of fill maybe the competitive void now, like getting a client or that sort of thing? Like how is, I guess, being an agent different than being a player? Like, is it just totally different, or do you kind of have some of that same, like the good part of it or the joy of it? You get some of that through.
Yeah, I think I love hockey now more than, I can remember when I played. So it gives me a unique perspective. When I first started, it was a bit therapeutic to allow me to make amends with maybe how things went for my own playing career. But yeah, it's a competitive business, but it's super rewarding, and having the relationships with players. And I don't know what it's like to be as talented as a Will Smith or a Lane Hutson. I played with players that were, as talented as City. And I think the difference is the best players do love it, and I think when things get hard, because it gets hard for everyone, it gets hard for, Connor McDavid, right? Like but you have to have that joy in order to have, stack the deck in your favor to get through the adversity.
And I had to ask you, in my research, I saw that you went to the same high school as Will and Mike Greer. So if Sharks fans, if you were ever worried about Will Smith signing with the Sharks, if you saw they all went to
I just think it's really cool. The headmaster there is Bill Burke. He's finishing, I think, his 30th year there. This is his last year, but he makes the school, all boys school, small. I said class with sometimes only 10 other students. You get that personal attention. You're not a number. So I think for a young student athlete, or any person that age, there's a huge benefit to being in that type of environment as a young adolescent.
So I think moving on to the star of the show, Will Smith. One When did the Sharks start telling you, kind of signaling, hey, I think Will is ready to come out of college? Was it like immediate, like as soon as they drafted him, come on over? Or was
After
it like,
he scored 4 points in a game?
yeah, it's like, all right, come on in. When did they start kind of telling you?
Yeah, there were conversations throughout the year, and Tommy Wingels, we saw him a bunch after games, and I think it was always going to be like there. I knew there's going to be an argument either way. Like it's not so black and white. That the Sharks' preference was to sign Will, and I think I'm of the opinion that that's not always the case, right? There are situations with players in their NHL clubs where it's, hey kid, what do you want to do? And I think as a player, you want to be in a position where it becomes much more definitive from the NHL team's perspective. This is done to a player's head, but this is our opinion. Here are the reasons why. This is our development plan for you at that next level. And I do think with the season that Will had, right? Like if you look back to Jack Eichel, was there a debate? Yeah, he was second overall that year, but same number of points. Both teams lost in the national championship game. Like I don't think there was such a debate on is Jack Eichel ready for the next step. Both ways, just because of how special of a team Boston College had this year, how special it will be next year too. And so I think that's what made this situation unique is you have a player that loved his school, loved his teammates, loved his coaches. They had success. They were winning as a team. Every player was having individual success. So that's what created the nuance, I think. But from a hockey standpoint, Will is ready for the NHL.
I mean, you could have just said after Will dropped like 9 points in the regional right over the weekend, a free agent. He does have the ultimate sort of like, well, I would like to go back instead, even if you guys might prefer I come out or that sort of thing, right? And anyway, when does Will decide? How many meetings does he have with Mike or a Todd or the Sharks, or do you insulate Will from like those types of meetings? I know you mentioned that he meets with Tommy Wingels, but I'm sure Tommy's not asking him, hey, are you coming out? Are you coming out? Right. That's more of a personal, like, I saw this in your game and that sort of thing. Right. And so not negotiating, but that process of coming to this decision with the higher ups of the Sharks, does Will have, or like I said, do you kind of insulate from
I don't think that was, a couple of reasons out of respect for, a freshman having such a great season on such a great team. And also, Will wanting to stay in the moment. Like I'm sure in the back of his mind going into the Frozen Four, he thought that, maybe this is it. But I also can say that it wasn't until the season totally ended that he dove into the process of what the next step was going to be for him and started, making his pros and cons lists and really, thinking through it, asking others their opinion. But ultimately, 100% his decision.
Who does he ask for advice? Like, who are like obviously your Gauthier, who did make the jump, was he ahead of Will, or anybody else that maybe has had NHL experience? Who does he sort of lean on for advice?
I think his family, other players who were on a similar path, national program, college, and stayed a year or left after a year. I know we had those conversations to get their perspective. And, again, I think it's as much as you're not going to convince a player out of, achieving a lifelong goal of theirs to play in the NHL. But at the same time, when another player who decides to go back to school and says, well, the NHL is always going to be there, they're also right. Because it's not a full season. It's 7 more months and lifestyle and easier schedule. So I think there is a lot that goes into it. And from just a hockey standpoint, opportunity in San Jose, the season that Will had, to me, that part of it was black and white. He's right.
And
go ahead.
A little earlier a month before this, actually more than a month before, I think, Ryan Leonard comes out. The Capitals announced that he is coming back. Obviously, Will, I'm sure, knew well beforehand, them being good friends and all that stuff. But how does that kind of impact things? Is it like for Will or you? Is like, oh shoot, well maybe this is something for Will to think about. I mean, what did that kind of announcement mean for Will's decision?
Yeah, I put myself in Will's shoes. I remember that day where Leonard decided to go back. Yeah, I think it probably did make it a more difficult decision for Will. I mean, that line, those three players, the chemistry that they have, I don't think we're going to see that again for a long time. They're special. Next 15 years, there's going to be NHL teams trying to get 2 out of the 3 or 3 out of the 3 to recreate that magic.
And I guess it's my final question about this part of the process, because I'm just curious about this entire process. We're I think we're only in like April in my questioning so far.
Right.
But,
right.
So season ends. Will starts to really think about this. Just with Will, like, this is why we think X and X. You should come out, that kind of stuff, or is it more they let Will have his time, and then when Will talks to the Sharks again, and Will's already sort of made his pros and cons list, or like I said, do the Sharks contribute to that? Does he talk?
Yeah, we really just had one call laying out the case for Will to take that next step, and from there it was mostly me just keeping Mike updated with how his decision making process was going, and then we should read our text thread where I just ghosted you for about 6 weeks. And, but I think I remember that one time I replied where, there was nothing, the timing of all of this is a little bit arbitrary, right? Because once the NHL season is over, like Will could have signed the day after the national championship. I think there were 2 games left on the West Coast, but it's not enough to burn a year off the contract. You just lost the national championship game. And I did reply to you that time, Sheng, just because I didn't want people to think that there was a window of time here where a decision needed to be made from like a business standpoint. Probably around May 3rd, like first couple of days of May. I think I've always felt like there's no right or wrong decision, but it has to be your decision. And also, Ryan Leonard going back to BC, as much as it might impact, you can't let the fate of a ping pong ball determine that decision for you. So I had encouraged Will, outside of what happens at the lottery, what's best for you. Mm-hmm. And so he had communicated that to San Jose right before he left for World Championships.
Right, and I forgot to mention.
Oh yeah, I'm probably jumping ahead a little bit.
Oh no, it's okay. But I wanted to communicate to everybody listening that Sean was not my source. I put out a story a couple of days before it was announced. So he was not my source. If I need to show that, I can't show all the text because that's between Sean and I. But the dates of the text and whatnot, if I
and you also asked me to confirm or deny what your source was telling you, and I left you on red.
Did not respond.
So, I hate doing it, but sometimes I have to.
No, you have to do that, and that's why I take no offense to it. That's part of your job. Your job isn't to tell me everything and that sort of thing. But one thing from all this, so that is good that I get from this, that during the season, of course, we'll ask Mike what's going on with Will, et cetera, and he always says, "Oh, we'll have those conversations end of the season." And well, it's good to know that Mike was not lying about that. That indeed, that these conversations really do happen at the end of the season. It makes sense. You want to insulate Will from all these things.
Yep.
So I guess we're kind of jumped to it already, but how close of a decision really was it? What ultimately tipped Will towards signing? Was there a single thing?
I don't know that there was a single thing. I think, he's a confident player. And again, his goal was to play in the NHL. I'm sure from the time he started playing hockey, and 4th overall pick, you look at the other 3 guys picked ahead of you, jump in, they have success. He understands the areas of his game that need to him. Like even from a statistical standpoint, when those three players were on the ice, you know, they were owning 70% of the shots, 70% of the scoring chances. He could go out next year and score 90 points in college. But are you developing those other areas of your game? Will the game itself, the league you're playing in, keep you honest to be able to address some of those, areas of improvement? I think that was a big part of it.
Since there's a little bit of maybe desirable difficulty with being away from the line that you've been with for 2-3 years now and dominating with.
Just a pure individual development standpoint, I think the college game, you don't see, if you watch an NHL game, you can see the team in the D zone get into their structure. And I think the college game is out of your own end. So I think from a development standpoint, there were just looking at, okay, what's the environment I'm going to be in on a day-to-day basis in practice? What's the team going to be working on? What am I going to be working on? What's the coach going to hold me accountable to when I'm on the ice? It's hard to defend when you have the puck the entire game, right?
Yeah, very good
point.
And
you mentioned the draft lottery, and of course the Sharks win the draft lottery, and they get Macklin Celebrini, or they get the number 1 pick that will become Macklin Celebrini. And you mentioned that Will had made his decision days in advance, that it wasn't tied into getting Macklin. That was sort of the speculation outside in the media. But the prospect that they're going to draft is likely going to start with Will, as opposed to, let's say, the Sharks get the number 2 or 3 pick, and you really don't know whoever they drafted, that player is going to be ready for the NHL as a 17, 18-year-old next season. But in this case, though, with Macklin, we're all pretty sure that he's going to be ready for the NHL. And so that's sort of nice to sort of have it's not exactly like BC and hanging out with Gabe and Ryan, but it's having a running partner from the kind of the get-go, and also to start the clock on a contract at the same time and all those kind of things, right? But that's nice, though.
No, I think San Jose deserves that, the excitement that goes around having the first overall pick. I think it makes it more exciting for everyone in that organization right now. I reminded Will, I remember when was it 2005 or 2006 where Boston traded Thornton to San Jose? I remember
2005,
yeah. And from, I think they made the playoff 17 out of the last 21 years. There's a crazy stat. Like they were in it every year. I mean, I remember watching games. My best friend growing up, Nick Petrecki, who was a first-round pick to San Jose,
wow. Yeah,
ended up only playing one game, but I kind of experienced just the buzz around San Jose during those years, and for San Jose to be able to accelerate things a little bit more, even just from an optics standpoint or an excitement standpoint, I think is great for Will and everyone involved with the team.
But is this important, though, to just a part of the two teenagers together, though, that's a nice...
No question.
Yeah.
No question. Yep. Yeah. I mean, Taves and Kane, I think that's the hope for everyone.
No pressure, guys.
No pressure at all. Yeah. 2 Hall of Famers, probably.
I also wanted to ask you, this is more of the nuts and bolts of it, but obviously with Will's contract and obviously his leverage again as an NCAA free agent, that there is the option of him going down to the AHL. And we asked Will about that. And of course, he says, is a good kid. He says that, if development staff, they deemed I need to go there, I'll go there. I'm sure that he will. But there's also the other factor too of the contract sliding. And that's if Will only plays 9 games next year with 9 NHL games with the Sharks. But I have to imagine that maybe you can't say this out loud, but that the contract's not going to slide. No matter what happens, if the Sharks do deem that Will needs a little AHL time, that part of the agreement or for him to come out is that he should be ready for NHL, that he thinks so, and the Sharks genuinely think so too, and that his development is best served in NHL too.
Yeah, look, that comes up in conversations as part of what do you guys think is best for Will's development? What's the plan? But I also think without really saying anything, you know, you can look at anyone who's kind of followed the progress of other high picks over the last few years. It's a totally different 10, 15 years ago, high picks, whether they were college or major junior players, like they spent time in the American League. Mm-hmm. And I think now, I mean, the league has gotten so much younger. It's a young man's game. And I think every organization is looking at expectations are, I'm sure there's very careful deliberations as to when do we use this card, you know? Mm-hmm. Now, certainly, if there's an injury or, you know, the Barracuda are poised for a, you know, Calder Cup playoff run, and it's about getting experience. I think I'm not saying that's specific to San Jose, but I think that's how NHL managers are looking at how to handle top prospects.
Right. That makes sense. And also, too, it's sort of, I imagine, like maybe a collaborative process in a sense that the Sharks aren't telling Will to come out if they think that he is at the AHL level, because that doesn't make a ton of sense for Will, maybe. And
no, I think the team, I mean, my perspective is the team that he was on would be a really good team in the AHL.
Yeah.
You know,
that's fair.
And
yeah, that's
probably better than the San Jose. To be honest with you.
But again, the AHL is a hard league. It's hard for different reasons, and I think for some players, it's exactly what they need, and for others, it's, you know, you proceed with caution if this is kind of this
right. I think
the league that you want to have a player go to.
What I'm driving at, though, is that Will doesn't come out if there's not agreement basically between all parties, between Will, yourself, the Sharks, that he is AHL ready.
Yeah, I would use like the word expectation as opposed to agreement. But yeah, I think that's fair.
Yeah. Okay. One thing I had to ask you too, I know you can't say too much about this because it's another agent's player and that sort of thing, but obviously Will being teammates with Cutter Gauthier, and that was a huge story last year. Cutter kind of pushing the Flyers to trade him, and the Flyers ultimately do trade him to Anaheim. And we haven't seen a situation, I think, in a very long time, a pick this high. I know we've had situations like Adam Fox, but that was a different situation because Adam was a second round pick that became a top flight prospect. But anyway, my question about this, I think you can answer, though, is did that situation with Cutter kind of change? Has it changed sort of the paradigm in some degree of NHL teams, kind of discussions, negotiations, how they treat their top NCAA a couple months ago? Of course, I reached out to you and asked you, like, hey, what's going on, Will? Everything good with the Sharks? And you got back to me. I wrote a story about it. Yeah, everything's good with the Sharks, right? But people are still asking me.
Sure.
I think 3 weeks ago I wrote a story, something like I don't remember the title of it, but I just said like the title of it was something like Smith. I don't remember, but basically people were getting on me because I didn't specify like this year. So people were like, wait, does it mean he's not going to sign at all? And so there was that sort of people were still asking me, like, is he actually going to sign? I'm really worried about this. I don't know. I'm not sure why, but so definitely that paranoia, though, after the Cutter situation is out there among the fan base. But generally with teams, though, do you kind of see like, oh, we got to treat our NCAA guys maybe a little differently, or just be aware of this, that this is a card that actually can be played, even though it hasn't been a lot over the years.
Yeah. I mean, maybe like from my standpoint, I mean, I probably replied to that text right away from you, Sheng, only because I think, like you said, that situation last year was so fresh. Like, it's not a trend, right? I don't know that it'll become a trend. And the last thing I would want would be to have any fans or management think that anything was trending in that situation with Will, because it just wasn't the case. In the other player's case, you know, it was a different GM coming into the fold, in which case, maybe that was what was best for the player. But there was never any thought of that. And I do think some of the paranoia is just due to, you know, it happening last summer with a U.S. player not even last summer. When was that?
Well, Qatar, the trade just happened this past
season. That's right. That's right. Yeah.
I guess Qatar had told the Flyers a while ago that
So U.S. player, same college,
right.
Same World Junior team. So I think that's why it would just freshen everybody's mind, and I was sensitive to that and didn't want anyone to even perceive that was the case when Will took some time to decide or anything like that. But I guess it's just natural.
So you don't think that's a trend, though, right? That's what you said. That just
no, because I'm sure there are other GMs in the NHL that will say, "Oh, all right, we'll trade you 3 years from now." I'm sure there are.
Yeah. The title of the story was actually, this was from a couple weeks ago, and this was when Will was in Czechia, and a reporter there asked him if he had decided, and he said up in the air. I guess it wasn't up in the air.
Yeah, no, we can get it. I think it's probably important to just get into that time frame while over there. So, like I said, the decision had already been made. He had notified his coaches. He had notified Mike. A couple of reasons went into him wanting to wait to sign until he got home. I think the two biggest ones were, you're one of the younger players in this tournament. You're at the start of the tournament, you're trying to carve out a role in the team and showcase yourself as best you can. And then you find yourself in a situation where you're not in the lineup. Is it right to put the spotlight on me? If the attention will quickly turn to another player on my team about what he's going to do. But I think the biggest reason was, and I can appreciate it more now, was just having the chance to be with family on such an important day, like was the case on Tuesday. His sister Grace, who's one of his biggest fans, has played that supportive older sister role, and it ended up being her college graduation at the end of May, which Will unfortunately couldn't attend. And so I think having her have that time in the spotlight for her own accomplishments was important to Will, and just generally having the chance to be around family and friends when that contract gets inked and announced.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's very thoughtful. Of when you get
I see all the tweets. I see all the tweets. So I saw that one.
Like Will didn't have a chance to put that first question on reads.
Right.
He had to answer in some kind of way without. And he can't give it away because he knows he's smart enough, right? In this sort of media everywhere world, that he's got to sort of fib a bit, because otherwise then it starts, like I said, it takes away from his sister's graduation. It takes away from Team USA and what they're trying to accomplish at a World Championships. I did want to say though that paranoia though. So that story that I wrote, the title was initially "Report: Will Smith says he still hasn't decided if he's signing with Sharks," and so everyone thinks oh no, what do you mean? Like he's never signing with the Sharks? And I was like, oh no, I forgot about Qatar. So I had to add to it. He hasn't decided if he's signing with the Sharks next year in the title. So that's how paranoid everyone is about it. But it's good that it's not a trend. But actually, my next question, well, it's actually kind of related to this track that we're talking about. But actually, the assume that then thereafter he tells his teammates, he tells his good friends Ryan, Gabe, he tells Mike Greer, all around that same time frame, right? And so, how hard is it to kind of keep that secret? Of course, in this situation, I mean, if Will decided on basically May 3rd, I mean, that's pretty good. That's about 3 weeks of it not coming out, right? And I texted you on, basically, someone told me on Friday. We're talking. So last week, so we're talking on Thursday today, May 30th. Someone told me on Friday, very good source that I trust, not Sean, obviously. So I texted Sean for confirmation, and I got crickets, but understand, of course, man. But anyway, just how hard is it to kind of keep it very closed in that 2-3 weeks when pretty much only Will and his inner circle and the Sharks inner circle, BC inner circle know?
I don't know if it's that I don't know if it's that difficult because people always speculate one side or the other. Like for every tweet that I saw that Will was signing, you see another report that he's returning to school. So I think we've all been conditioned to that when we see rumors and speculation to treat it as such. What was funny was that on Tuesday morning, it did get out there. I thought it was really unique that the Sharks allowed Will to make the announcement first across his channels. And maybe, I don't know, Tuesday morning, I saw some tweets from some reputable sources. So they had the time.
Me, right? So I wasn't reputable on Sunday.
You are reputable. Yeah, you are reputable.
You scooped it, right? You were 2 days early. So.
Yeah.
Well, I'll say on my side, like I'm not the whatever a character in the story, but it is actually interesting though, these kind of like media with like news scoop stories, that sort of thing. Like I consciously thought, well, I'm going to give Sean a couple of days. I would love to have a confirmation, but like I told you in my text, like the source, wasn't like a threat or anything. It was like source is strong enough. I'm going to run with it regardless. But of course, it'd be nice to have a confirmation. And so I gave a couple of days on that. And by Sunday, I hadn't heard anything from Sean. And I actually had more confirmation from other people that I trusted. So, okay, so this story definitely is worth putting out there. And I think constantly in my mind too, like, okay, next day is Memorial Day. Now, of course, Canada doesn't celebrate Memorial Day, so I'm going to kick myself tomorrow if the next day on Elliot Friedman's 32 Thoughts podcast, it releases Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, I think, that Elliot puts it out there. It's like, damn it. Yeah. So I got to put it out on Sunday. And, of course, I know the Sharks themselves aren't going to – it's Memorial Day, so they're not going to put out that story, right? So but you kind of alluded to, like, on Tuesday that before we get to the Sharks putting it out on Tuesday, So now on Sunday, it's now I post my story and it's out there on social media a little bit now. Like, is anyone texting you at this point now, or for like confirmation, or I don't know? Yeah, like how does that go? Like now, it's kind of out there now. Like I'm not a reach of Elliot Friedman, but like now it's a little bit out there now. So like how does that kind of like change things as an agent? Just that now it's on social media a little bit.
Like Tuesday, Sheng, I checked in with you, right? Because I owed you a follow-up because the gag order was in full effect. Right. So I think I spent Tuesday afternoon and evening replying to everyone that I had ghosted over the last 48 hours.
Yeah. Okay, fair enough. Yeah. And then getting to the Tuesday point, so it starts leaking out. I think I saw a BC hockey blog was, I think, the first one I saw on Tuesday with it, I believe. And did the Sharks plan on always kind of putting it out on Tuesday, or was that sort of like, okay, now it's out with more people now, like we may as well we know it's not going to happen.
Tuesday, I think, was the day heading into the weekend where we were going to do it.
Okay. See, this is part of my calculation because I know that it's not going to happen on Memorial Day. If I wait to put my story out on Tuesday on a regular day, I could have put my story out on Sunday or Monday basically because I know that the chances of Sharks releasing huge news on a holiday are just not. You usually hold that stuff. So, but anyway, so that's all interesting and part of the process. And yes, we're friends again. So I understand that you had to ghost me, and it's all good. So.
Awesome.
Journalistic strategery from Sheng over here.
Yeah.
It's all interesting. It is the sort of I would say I don't know if it's a game of cat and mouse, but like you have to be respectful of your sources, and like I don't think like I was overwhelming Sean with texts. I hope not. I sent a couple. No. I lay out my situation, and if you can say something, awesome. If you can't, I understand. Like your number one fealty is to your client. It's not to San Jose Hockey Now and for me to break a story. But it just was interesting though that you guys knew for so long, kind of. Because at a certain point, obviously over 3 weeks, right, it does start to leak out to more people, right? At some point, like somebody from BC says something to somebody, or somebody from the Sharks kind of says like, yeah, he's coming out, and so eventually it's going to come out, right? But it's still pretty good though for 3 weeks to kind of keep it a secret.
Yeah, you're right. That's not bad.
So good job.
So they're like boilerplate, right? Like your AAV is this amount of money, and like you have 3 years or 2 years depending on when you sign. So like that's it. But is there more into that like contract negotiation with a team for an ELC?
Top 5 or top 10. I think for a player in Will's case, it's you can look at draft slotting and what players over the past 5 years have gotten in a similar position. So, yeah, pretty standardized, and those B bonuses are hard to hit. But I think the last thing you'd want is to have a player that has an incredible third, final season of his ELC and cost him some money. So.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. Is the difference between A bonuses and B bonuses? Is it just kind of like, since Will is a top 5 pick, he gets like max on both? And actually, can you talk a little bit about the difference between the two?
Sure. So the A bonus pool, it's 1 million max A bonuses, 250,000 a category. So that's top 3 on your team and plus minus 20 for a forward. It's 20 goals. 35 assists, 60 points, top 3 time on ice. There's a category for all-star game selection, all-star game MVP. So you can, they're still difficult categories to hit, but a little bit more feasible. The B bonuses are, I guess you could think of like league awards, but the teams are able to pay based on a player finishing top 5 in any major league awards, minus the Calder, top 10 in goals, points, assists. So like, I don't know, was Connor McDavid top 10 in scoring? He might have been the last. Yeah, I don't know. So they're hard to hit, right? But
interesting. And the
by position, maybe it's easier for an offensive defenseman, but again, it's more looking at a spreadsheet and looking at what prior picks in a similar range have gotten and using that to guide the discussion.
It's not really
and then finding the range and having a discussion within that range.
Interesting.
So are those Wills, I mean, the A bonuses, like you said, are sort of the more likely ones. So 25, 30, 20 goals, 35 assists, 60
points per forward.
Top 3, you said, in plus minus. Top 3 in ice time too.
And forward, in your forward
ice time,
group,
okay.
And ice time, and then 0.73 points per game. Minimum 42. Yeah, it's always fun to look back and usually that I remember like Lane Hudson assisted on Uri Slafkovsky's 20th goal. So, you saw some chatter about how much, he's going to pay Lane for cashing in on $250,000 bonus.
Right.
Cute.
And it was the last game of the season too.
Right. So specifically, so like, let's just put one out there. So Will scores 20 goals more. Okay. So there's could be 7, 8 categories, but the max is $1 million. So like, even if Will hits all 8 categories, it's still
right. It's capped at $1 million.
That quarter bill.
Yeah. It's an interesting thought though, because like the third year, you expect maybe some growth and development that maybe a lot of these could be hit.
Yeah, I think so. I think Logan Cooley had 20 this year. Quentin Byfield had 20 this year. Uri Slafkovsky had 20. It's fun to go through and look who hit these.
And specifically too, I was wondering with the B bonus, and let's say you win
to pay a B bonus for the Calder Trophy. There's a few other league awards. Gosh, I'm actually pretty bad with what league award is what. I wish they'd standardize some of the names. To be honest with you,
Rookie of the year.
Right. If I think it's a cascading pay scale if you're third, second, first in Calder voting.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well,
but it's paid by the league and not the team.
Oh, is that what? Okay. That's interesting. I actually didn't realize that the teams can't pay Calder, but you said the league pays for that. Okay, that's interesting. Okay, what does the league pay for that anyway? I know it's a little bit of a tangent here, but
I'm not sure. I want to say like maybe in that range if you win the Calder, maybe it's around 200,000. I'd have to check.
You might need to find out this year. So yeah, Will's a betting favorite along with his teammate Macklin. So
that's right.
So we had, I guess we're probably getting to the end here. We were looking through like other players that you had. Is that kind of your focus? Is more in this NCAA route of players?
I think it's just geographically in the U.S. But I don't know. I think for American players now, with the changing landscape at the NCAA level, I just think more will be, fewer players will be induced by going to play in the CHL. So I think we certainly trust CHL versus BCHL, and most of those roads lead to college. Yeah.
So do you just mention, like, is Matthew Wood one of your clients too, or?
He is. Yep.
Oh, okay, cool. Do you have anybody that you can say in the 2024 draft? I know technically for some of the NCAA guys, you're just advisors. I don't know if you can say it out loud, but like just anybody to look for you from this coming draft.
Lane Hudson, or Lane Hudson's brother Cole, Camille Bednarik, a 200-foot centerman from the national team, both going to BU. So that's my tire pump for those draft eligible guys.
Awesome. Well, Sean, really appreciate time here. Keegan, do you have any more questions?
I think that's all said. That was a lot of information about all the signing for sure.
Yeah, now I'll be watching you guys for breaking some news on the coach.
Yeah.
Now you're
following with. We've been following with Will Smith Watch. We've been doing that once a week. We've been introducing Will Smith Watch. It's finally.
I think someone joked that he has a horrible name for Twitter or Google search optimization.
Yep. Search Will Smith hockey.
Yeah.
That's like the one.
Yeah.
Will Smith SJ. Will Smith Sharks.
Into all of our YouTube and all of our podcasts, Will Smith hockey, because he found that that's what people search for. Like if you just put Will Smith, obviously there's an actor, there's a cat,
hockey,
Will Smith hockey.
Yeah, I don't know.
That's funny.
Gaming the system.
And then you guys can break that. I believe he is wearing number 2.
Yep.
So
yes, yeah. The Sharks actually they're already
he doesn't
selling
have a choice.
number 2 jerseys. Yeah. Oh, I don't know if I can say this too. So, but exactly.
Yeah.
Not Sean Coffey.
Yeah. All Coffey.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'd like to.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
As you know, Shane.
Yes, as I know.
Yeah, we've had a wide range of opinions on Will. Not that wide. Most of them positive.
That's how it is. I mean, sports fans debate the best players, right? And the best players thrive on that debate. I think the best players, will go to the ends of the earth to find players that, find fans or pundits that doubt them. And I think that's what makes it fun, And proving people wrong in sports is why these guys, a big reason why these guys play and what drives them.
As it said, it's
and it fuels every internet debate,
Yes.
for decades. Have you on again at some point after Will Smith wins the Calder?
There we go. Awesome. All right, guys.
Thanks, Sean.
Talk soon. Take care.